behave in case there's a little bit of drag in my voice, in case I sound a little bit tired, is because I just spent a week in Northeast Ohio helping take care of my 3.5-year-old nephew and my 18-month-old nephew while their parents were away. And I gotta say, they're well-behaved kids. They're wonderful kids. Their parents are doing a wonderful job with them. And I've said that about very few people in my life, but their parents are doing a great job. But I forgot how exhausting toddlers are.
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, like, you know how some people say, like, oh, I'd pay anything to be able to go back to high school or go back to college again or go...
Yeah.
I would pay so much money to not have to go back in time and be a dad to younger kids again.
Yeah.
I loved it while I was in it. There's a million joys and benefits to it. It's exhausting. It's an exhausting time of life.
Oh my God!
There's nothing wrong in acknowledging that. It's an exhausting time of life.
Yeah, and I mean, the good news is it's so easy to be hysterical, right? I'd pick this little kid, and the older kid weighs about, maybe 50 pounds. He's maybe one wet T-shirt away from 50 pounds. I mean, he's a sparse kid, so I can pick him right up by the feet and hang him upside down with no problem at all. And he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I know all bats like to hang upside down, so I'm just helping you out." And he says, from upside down, "I am a little boy, not a bat." Which is the funniest thing in the world, right? So then for the rest of the week, I'm pretending to mistake him for a bat, which of course leaves him perplexed, is funny as hell, and it's really fun to play in that mental playground.
Sure.
But again, I've sung Wheels on the Bus more times than I can count at this point. I've sung all of the songs, tried to remember all the verses and all the words and so on and so forth. Got corrected on the verses that I didn't know correctly. But at the end of the day, I would collapse into bed and zonk out because these kids just took it out of you.
First of all, you're a good family member to do this.
Yeah.
Second of all, you collapse into bed at the end of the day. I remember it was everything I could do to maintain my creativity and output when my kids were younger.
Yeah.
It's a tricky, there's about a 3 to 5 year window there where it gets tough.
But I got to tell you this. So we were the kids enamored with the solar system right now and sharks. The sharks and the solar system.
Right.
So when I show up, I said, "Hey, Uncle Brad and you, we are going to carve jack-o'-lanterns," because it was like maybe 14 days before Christmas, before Halloween. And I said, and their parents are still there at this point. I go, "We're going to use power tools." And Dad's eyes get big. I'm like, "It's going to be okay." I had an idea to do the solar system in a pumpkin using a drill at different sizes to get the different sized planets. I had a whole idea for Jupiter and Saturn. and I thought this kid's going to love using power tools because he's got toy power tools that he loves, right?
Sure.
And so while they were away at daycare for one of the days, I was at home scooping out 2 pumpkins, getting them ready. And he gets back because we wanted to keep them on their routine. And also, good Lord, we needed a little bit of time too. Right. So we get him back from daycare, and I said, "Hey, guess what? Jack-o'-lantern time." I said, "We're going to get ready to carve that solar system." He goes, "I just want to do a face." I go, "But I got the power tools. I got your dad's drill." He says, "I want to do a face. I want to do a frowny face."
Hold on. Think this through, though. You have had 50 turns around the sun to do a Halloween. Yeah. He's had 1, 2. Of course he wants to do a jack-o'-lantern.
He wants to do a jack... And of course, I'm like, we're going to do a jack-o'-lantern face. That's what we're going to do. But it was so funny because I thought that this big, meticulous plan that I had was going to absolutely... make him amazed. And all he wanted, and he was so happy just doing a face. So I had to go to the Walmarts to pick up some lights for the inside of the jack-o'-lantern. And Dave, do you remember Little Golden Books?
Yes.
I'm looking for a little something to bring the kids home, a little something fun from Uncle Brad. They had a Little Golden Book. Do you want to know what it was?
What's that?
Jaws. It was the Jaws Little Golden Book based on the movie.
Sure.
Based on the movie, and it was all about big and little, these big
hey,
shark.
kids, we're going to need a bigger boat, that kind of thing.
Exactly. That was in the Jaws books of opposites. And, of course, I had to buy it. The kid, again, didn't care for beans for it because he doesn't know Jaws from any. He likes sharks, but that was about it. But I sat there going, this is the most brilliant marketing strategy anywhere, because everybody my age is going to buy the Little Golden Book of Jaws.
Oh, God. I mean, we should probably have a whole subsegment at some point about how specifically brilliant the 1950s, 60s marketing technique of using gold foil along the strip of a book to make it a golden book. I mean, that was brilliant marketing as far as differentiation in the market. But in general, I am going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about differentiating Northeast Ohio and making comics.
And making a very tired living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of the Webcomics Handbook on Substack and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, well-rested with older kids, cartoonist of Drive in Sheldon, and co-director of the documentary Stripped.
Oh, I was so happy to see my adult kids, I can't even tell you. And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We've got a very big, exciting show for everybody. But before we do, I just want to ask you one question as a Californian. I don't know what northeastern Ohio is like. That's like Akron, or what is that, Canton? I don't know what's in northeast Ohio.
That's further. I mean, technically, I guess you could put Akron and Canton into northeastern Ohio. And I think accurately that's true. But it's mostly, we were in the Cleveland area. We were up in Cleveland.
Oh, Cleveland is north. Okay. Well, did you get to Columbus for the Cartoonist Museum at all, or no?
No, that would have been a little bit of a hike away from Cleveland, so we didn't get over there.
Gotcha. Well, a fun fact from Dave Kellett's personal history: my college roommate, we both went to Notre Dame, and he went on to become an internist and is now the head of the internal surgery department in Cleveland. I'm a cartoonist. I ask you, which one is a greater failure with their education? My friend Paul in Cleveland. Paul, if you're listening, I'm sure he's not.
Well, listen, at this point, I'll tell you, I choose you, because if I had to do a podcast with an internist, I don't know that I'd be having as much fun.
Yeah, but if you have a sudden spleen that goes wacko, you're going to need Paul's help.
Then I'm going to want your friend Paul. Yeah.
Anyway, so we've got a couple of things to jump into from readers this week.
Yeah.
So our first question over at patreon.com/comiclab, Brad comes in and says, "Hey, Brad and Dave, thanks to your amazing advice, I've been able to move into a full-time role as a cartoonist and comic creator." Whoa, hey,
that's impressive.
I think that's the first time we've had that, right?
I love hearing that. I love hearing when people are able to take something and make useful out of the show and some of the information we share. There's nothing that makes me happier than that.
I know, that's still a dang delight, but it's not just praise, Brad, because here comes the question. So my question for both of you is, have you or do you still get weird looks or looks of disbelief when asked what you do as a profession and you reply that you make comics? I have found it interesting how many people believe that it can't be a real job or a full-time job, and was wondering if you guys have had any similar experiences. So, Brad, just walking down the street, you look to me like you're a cartoonist, but do people respond in weird ways when you say you're a cartoonist?
They do not respond in weird ways, but that's mainly because I stopped telling people I was a cartoonist a few years ago.
Did you really?
Yeah, because it's not that I'm ashamed or anything else like that, but being a cartoonist is a very unique thing. It's not something that you meet every day. And I know if I tell people I'm a cartoonist, there's going to be a conversation that happens after that. And 9 chances out of 10, I'm not interested in having a conversation. I just don't want to talk to these people for that long.
So this is very specifically Brad's curmudgeonly response to the human race. I mean, I just don't want to talk to anybody. That's my thing.
I will give them a generic, kind of thing.
I'm an accountant.
Yeah.
Well, that ends that.
Nobody wants to talk to an accountant, right? So yeah, I'm not being funny here. That when I first went full time, I was telling everybody who I could stop on the street. Oh yeah, Brad Geiger, cartoonist. Yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah, what's that? Oh yeah, okay. Well, you're okay. I know it's trash day. Go ahead, pick up the trash, put it in the truck. But that is the trash bag of a cartoonist, just in case you wanted to know. And but after a little while, because people say it's the same thing. Nobody believes it, and it's not that they can't believe that I'm a cartoonist. They can't believe that there are people who make their living doing this thing in the world. And there are very few of us who are able to pull that off. It's very difficult. It's in some ways, it's the best time ever to be a cartoonist because of the tools that we have at our disposal. And in some cases, and in some ways, it's also very difficult to break through and hit that point. So it's not that they don't believe that you could be a cartoonist. They just can't believe that there's somebody who still makes their living that way. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not interested in having that conversation with people. And until I get to know them a little better, something like that, then I'll say that. But I don't even bring it up. I just tell them a graphic designer or something.
Oh, really? You just say a parallel art form?
Yep.
You don't even say
just a graphic. Yeah, because then if they do have any questions, I can speak honestly enough to shut them down. and I can be believable in that moment. And then, because if I really did say I was a CPA, they might ask me a tax question and it would be very clear that I was lying. And now you've got to have a discussion about why you were lying, right?
Right.
And my whole thing is I don't want to have a discussion. I don't want to talk to you. So, and nobody's going to ask a lot of questions about a graphic designer, especially if they do. I start telling them the difference between a sans serif and a serif font. And when their eyelids get heavy, I just step away.
Just drift off. Just drift off. Yeah.
Very quietly.
I love how much Brad's answer can be summarized as "leave me alone." That is delicious to me. Just leave old man McGubbins on his porch alone because
I don't want to talk.
Don't you kick your soccer ball in my yard. You kids get out of here. I mean, no, here's the truth. I also, like Brad, have absolutely faced what the question asker is facing, which is that you say cartoonist and people are immediately flummoxed and confused and don't know, and they have a billion follow-up questions.
Yeah.
I will say, as much as I was joking around with Brad, I also in my 20s and 30s found every GD opportunity to drop into conversation that I was a cartoonist. Like be opening up a bank account. Like, well, I'm opening this up because I'm a cartoonist, so I need to open a bank. Well, I'm pumping this gas into my car because I have to drive to my studio. I'm a cartoonist.
I'm a cartoonist after all.
Everything was, and you just, I think what it is at my age, I just don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And by the way, that is not a shot towards our question asker because, for God's sakes, enjoy it. Enjoy being able to say that you are a cartoonist. Be proud of it. You've worked for it. You've gotten to it. Yeah. Brad and I did it as well in our 20s and 30s. We were dropping it all the time that we were cartoonists. I think what ends up happening is, like Brad, I also am a little bit curmudgeonly, but also for me in Los Angeles, specifically in the spheres that I walk in, with my wife being a TV showrunner, when I say I'm a cartoonist in LA, specifically for me, people immediately go, "Oh, what show are you working on?"
Yeah.
And then I have to say, "Oh no, I'm not an animator. I'm a comic strip cartoonist, or I'm a graphic novelist." And then they go, "Oh, what is that?" And then I have to explain that to people about what that is.
Already I'm exhausted.
Yeah. And so the thing is, once you've done that 100 or 200 times at various parties or social situations, you're like, I get where this is going to go. I don't need this. I don't need the win anymore. That's the best way to say it. I don't need the emotional win anymore.
And I also got so disappointed and disgusted even in this day and age, that if I did say I'm a cartoonist, people would say, "Oh, what newspaper are you in?" And it's like, I would always go, "Oh, what newspaper do you subscribe to? And they say, well, I don't subscribe to a newspaper. And I say, that's why I'm not in newspapers. What makes you think I'm in newspapers? You haven't subscribed for 100 years. I haven't subscribed in 100 years. But, what makes you think that I'm going to be in a newspaper? We got this thing called the internet. Oh, and then, of course, you can make a living doing that. Yeah, you know what? If you're good, you can make a living doing that. Yeah, as a matter of fact, yeah. But see, and now I'm defensive. I've got my back up against the wall.
Right, it does go into defensiveness. You're right.
Yes. And because, again, like the in between the lines of our question asker, like they're saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe anybody can make a living doing that. What we're hearing is, I can't believe you have the creativity to do that for a living. Right. And then you get defensive and, it doesn't end well. And also, I've had so many situations, like I used to carry my business cards with me, right? I don't do that anymore. A lot of times.
I don't either.
I've been in situations where I actually wanted to hand somebody a business card and I didn't have it because I don't carry them anyway. But back in the day, I would carry my business cards, and of course, they would have the Evil Ink logo nice and big on them, and my contact information. So then, if I did start talking about being a cartoonist with people and they'd want to check it out, I would give them my card, and the first thing they would see is Evil Incorporated. And there's a certain number of people, I could see the blood drain from their face because they were certain that I was up to no good.
Right, you're some kind of Satanist or something.
Right, like what's this guy up to? We were when I turned 50, we went to Mexico. And we were on this excursion, blah, blah, blah. The couple that we were with took pictures. We were eating later, and they said, oh, we had a couple pictures of you. Would you like them? And I said, oh, I love them. Give us your contact information. I gave them a business card and the face strap. And we had a couple nice little sentences, a couple nice little chatter, small talk. After that, they walked away. Carolyn looked at me and said, we're never going to see those pictures. And I said, why? She says, they're terrified of you. Why do you have to have Evil Ink on your business card? That's the name of my comic. Well, that's my business. And she says, we're never going to see those photos. And you know what? She was right. We never saw those photos. They never got in touch. They were terrified of me. So for that reason and 100 others, I just don't bring it up anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth reminding people that there are, at least in the ballpark, this is true. There are fewer professional cartoonists than there are National Basketball Association pros. In the United States and Canada. Now, having said that, I think if you were to expand the definition to pro-ams, people that make somewhere between, I don't know, $15,000 and $50,000 a year in their cartooning, but have to have a second job. That probably is 5, 6, 7 times the number of basketball, NBA players in the U.S. But the point still stands that there's not a lot of people, and statistically, you're very unlikely to bump into someone. For example, Brad, how many professional sculptors, do you run into in this world? They exist. We know they exist ostensibly, that they're out there somewhere.
It's amazing you mentioned that. You remember Esteban? The guy covered in glitter that I met on the flight home from the NCS?
Yes.
He called me up on Instagram yesterday just to see how I was doing. He said, I listened to the podcast. He says, you guys are hysterical. He loved the story we told about him and getting covered with glitter from the leaf blower. Right. And called. It was the first time, by the way, that this old man ever took a call on Instagram, of all things.
I tell you what, this old man over here didn't even know that was possible. You could take a phone call on Instagram.
He must have, I took Instagram off my phone, and I check in on it once a week to see if there's anybody trying to get in touch, but no more than that, because I completely divested. And it said Esteban tried to call you. So now I'm like, well, listen, I got to find out what Esteban is doing. So I put Instagram back on my phone, called him back. We had a very nice chat. But yeah, who knew you can do phone calls on the Instagram?
On the Instagram, the fact is on the Instagram, and maybe on the Facebook and on the Twitters. Anyway, so yeah, to summarize for this question asker. enjoy it. Swim in those waters. Talk about it as much as you want to your librarian, to your banker, to your dental assistant. Tell everybody you're a cartoonist. You deserve it. How fun. By the way, you don't have to be a pro to be able to say you're a cartoonist. You can be an amateur and a pro-am. Revel in the fact that you're a cartoonist. It's worth doing. But I think for Brad and I, what we're saying is after a couple decades of it, the luster of it fades a little bit, I guess. And maybe it shouldn't. Maybe that's to our detriment, Brad, that it's faded.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know. It's not that I'm not proud. I just don't want to talk to people. I cannot make this any more. Like if believe me, if there's somebody standing there that for some reason I want to strike up a conversation with,
right.
And the topic comes up, I will throw that out there because I know not only am I going to have lots of things to talk about, but I can be very charming. I've got lots of great stories. I can hold court for hours on being a cartoonist if I want to talk to you. The problem is I probably don't. I don't want to talk to you.
My favorite is saying something to the effect of, they're like, well, so what do you do on a day-to-day basis? And I say, well, are you familiar with Charles Schultz and Peanuts? And and they say, yes. And I say, well, that's what I do basically, except for 100,000th of the wealth and fame. That's what I do.
Right.
Is that, you divide it by 100,000 and that's what I'm able to pull in.
Hey everybody, Brad here. Quick correction. You're about to hear us talk about the software Procreate, and I am about to say that I'm pretty sure that Procreate does not have the ability to create a CMYK file. Our comics community on our Patreon ever so kindly pointed out that that is not true. Procreate does have a CMYK file. I just wanted you to have that information up front before we get into the conversation.
All right, well, let's do one more question before the break, Brad. This one is about software, and it says, hey, Brad and Dave, I'm curious to hear your insights on the software that you use to create comics. I currently use Procreate because of its affordability and simplicity. It has worked very well for my illustration projects in the past. However, now that I'm getting more into making comics, I'm noticing some of Procreate's limitations. I know many cartoonists and comic artists use Clip Studio, as does Brad, and I've heard Brad mention that he does very well with it. Could some artists also use Photoshop and Adobe products, but could you two talk about the software that you use, why you use it, and any advantages or disadvantages you know of between the different software packages that you've tried? So Brad, you go first because they specifically address you using CSP. Talk a little bit about how you got there. What do you like about it? What works about it? What doesn't work about it? How it preps for books well or doesn't do well?
Yeah.
What can we say about it?
So here's the deal. I'm not a huge fan of Procreate, and I'm very scared of when I hear somebody using Procreate because this person is saying, and I understand, it's affordable, it's easy to access and so forth. And I haven't checked recently. I just did a really quick cursory glance online to answer this question. But the last I checked, Procreate does not generate a CMYK file, right? So you're
is that true? It doesn't create it?
I just looked it up in a really
true,
quick
I
Google
100%
search.
Believe Brad, that is a problem. Yes. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, and that's that's a huge problem.
Yeah, for bookmaking,
because and you got to be very careful who you listen to in a case like this, because there are people out there who do videos or talks, and they'll say, that people like us say you got to work in CMYK, you can't work in RGB, and they'll hold up a book and they'll say this book is full of images that I did in RGB. And that person's right, and they're being very truthful. What they don't understand is the reason that book could be printed using RGB was that it was probably using some kind of a digital printing system, right? Definitely print on demand is going to use can use an RGB, and other digital printing methods, which is kind of like a very souped up digital photocopier, will take a RGB image. Fantastic. The problem with that is if you have the bad luck to get popular, if you have the bad luck to be able to make that rare pivot to being a full-time cartoonist and all of your images are created in RGB instead of CMYK, you are fucked because you'll never be able to generate you'll never be able to get those files prepared for CMYK printing and to do an offset print run using processed colors that is going to get your unit costs down, putting it out on a press where they're spitting out 1,000 copies every minute and a half of your book, getting that unit price down so that you can make a living doing comics. You're fucked. You're not going to be able to take and convert all those art. There's no push button solution to that. Not even with AI that I know of right now. And I'm very confident on that because you might be able to turn an RGB into a CMYK and a push button thing. But to get those color separations correct, to get what you need to do specifically for comics, you're fucked. So I'm not again, and I'll put the warning out right on the top. I haven't checked because obviously it isn't pursuant to my interests. I haven't checked up on Procreate lately, but I'll put it this way, if you're using software that is RGB only and you can't work in CMYK, then you're setting yourself up for a nightmare situation in which you are actually able to perhaps become a full-time cartoonist, and you can't because you've got years and years of stuff that your audience is ready to see, and you're never going to be able to make money off of them because you can't get your unit price down.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Brad that both Brad and I, like any cartoonist will say, like, as you're starting, the pens you use, the software you use, if you're making comics, great. If it gets you going, great. That's wonderful. What Brad and I have concerns about for certain software packages, as we're going to talk about in the next couple of minutes, is not so much getting the comic on social media or getting a comic on a web page, because those are still projected light. Yeah. It's taking that digital file and making it to a physically printed comic with a more limited physical ink package available to you. So let's talk for just a second about the difference between RGB and CMYK for the younger cartoonists that might not know. So one of the reasons why it's so hard in many cases to convert RGB to CMYK, and granted, there's software that can do it pretty well, but especially with oranges and greens and some weirder colors, the problem is RGB is projected light using red, green, blue. Yeah. It can produce, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but someone can do a quick Google search. It can produce tens of millions of tonalities and shades of color projection, right? Right. The problem there is that CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Did I nail that on the first time, right? Yep. Okay. Which basically means 4 different plates of ink color coming together to produce a printed page. When you get down to that, the permutations, the variations of color possible to you go from tens of millions to, I think, Brad, isn't it about 1 million or so?
It's not even 1 million. It's like maybe hundreds of thousands. In other words, it's a very drastic change unless you're using specialty inks. It's closer to hundreds of thousands of colors available in CMYK as opposed to the millions that are available in RGB. As a result, there are certain colors like the 100% green that you see in RGB that are unprintable in CMYK.
Yeah, you can't get to it.
Yeah, you could end up with a shade of green. The original KeenSpot logo, going all the way back to the early days of the internet, was produced in that kind of RGB green that looked great on the screen. They couldn't print it in a book. They couldn't get anything that came close to it when they had to print the KeenSpot logo because there's no ink for that. There's no ink combination.
Yeah. Which is why, if you've ever looked at like a branding presentation of like, here's the McDonald's logo in a physical sign, here's the McDonald's logo in a digital sign, here's the McDonald's logo as a bug on letterhead for corporate stuff. There's a lot of thought that goes behind what are the materials we can use to make this logo, right? And so that's why you tend to have more limited palettes for branding and for this and that, because they understand not everything can be done with projected light. There's going to have to be physical light. Anyway, all of this to say is for your software packages, because we lost the thread a little bit. For your software packages for cartooning, one of the reasons why we tend to steer people, we strongly steer people as they go from amateur to pro-am and from pro-am to pro towards more robust packages is because they allow for more finite control of both color output, PDF output for print. What else am I thinking of in terms of plate control, in terms of CMYK families, because there are different styles of CMYK around the world. You could have faux gras, you could have this or that. And so a more robust software package gives you more control. Just like any tool in your life where you could do basic plumbing with an average wrench, but you suddenly realize the first time you use a plumber's wrench, there's a reason why this tool exists. It just does the job better than like a wrench that I have in my toolbox. So much like that, once you get into cartooning for a bit, you'll realize, CSP does XYZ better. Adobe Photoshop does XYZ better. Adobe InDesign does XYZ better. And so that's why we tend to lean towards those packages.
Yeah. So to answer the question about software, I use Clip Studio for the inking, everything up to the coloring. I use Clip Studio. When I'm handing that off, I hand Alex Heberling a Photoshop file. She takes it from there and she colors it in Photoshop. I believe, if I understand Alex's process, she might even do the first several stages in RGB mode. But by the time she's ready to send it to me, she's going to turn that into CMYK. She's going to do all of the color separating things that I need for that image to have. And when she sends it to me, it's a CMYK document. It's a CMYK file. So we've got Clip Studio, Photoshop, and then when I'm putting my book together, I'm using InDesign. And here's the other thing. I see people in the Discord server. Look, you can put your book together in Clip Studio. This is great. And I'm like, I wouldn't do that you could put a gun to my head. You better be prepared to pull the trigger. I am not putting my book together in Clip Studio. Number one, it's not what that software was designed for, not so much. And maybe for black and white, but for color processing, I'm very, very reticent. Number two, even if I'm full of shnikes on that, I know how to make that InDesign document. I can fine tune that document, whether it's coated paper, whether it's uncoated paper.
That's true. Yep.
I can send that PDF out to my printer, making sure that the images do not get crunched or condensed or fucked with in any way. I can give them the full resolution. It's a huge PDF file, but my stuff prints fantastic. And when I get into a situation, I think the check that I wrote this year for printing was close to $15,000. It's a lot of fucking money to be
I can tell that Brad is a little bit having a cold and he's a little under the weather. I'll tell you why. Because it's like, and I've cut this check and it's a lot of fucking money and you're going to be fucked if you use this software. It's like Cussy McCusserton today over there. My God.
You're right. You're right. I might be a little bit exhausted. But no, I would not use Clip Studio to put a book together. I would use InDesign. That's what InDesign's for. So InDesign is built for that.
Let's tell them why you use Clip Studio. It's better at paneling. It's better at what you can do for individual tricks within the panel in terms of line art and layout. Every cartoonist that I know that has made the switch to CSP loves it for the actual drawing process, right? In terms of the modeling, the 3D modeling, the perspective, all that sort of stuff.
The 3D modeling, I can keep my characters a lot more close to on model. And of course, the lettering, the word balloon. But also, I find that my brushes, I get better responses from my brushes in Clip Studio. Like every now and again, I make a mistake and I've got to go to Photoshop to fix something. And I'll pick up a brush and I'll start, and I don't have the responsiveness in Photoshop that I have in Clip Studio.
Right.
And it might be because I just never spent time, fine tuning my Photoshop brushes, but I get better looking art in Clip Studio than I ever did in Photoshop. Plus, again, the ability to draw in perspective and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I use Clip Studio. It's the right tool for the job. When it gets colored, Photoshop's the right tool for the job. When you're laying a book out and you got to write a big check, InDesign is the right tool for the job. Now, let's take a pause here for a second, because a lot of people are upset with Adobe's quote unquote, mercenary, horrible price. And believe me, ever since the college that I used to teach at, they announced, if you hadn't been following the news, with 7 days notice that they were going out of business, and I'm not a teacher anymore.
Well, and for those that have not yet joined us on Patreon, my pro tip today that will be for Patreon exclusive for everyone can save you money on Adobe. So make sure you join us this week. It literally will pay for itself if you join us on Patreon this week for my pro tip this week, which is going to be speaking about Adobe software. So
that's a nice little
tune in
tease
for that one.
Yeah. So I'm not crazy about Adobe either. I'm not crazy about paying $60 a month for it. I keep telling myself it's okay. It's a tax write-off. It's a tax write-off. But
unless you listen to Dave Kellett's pro tip today over at patreon.com/Comic Lab.
But and some of you are going to immediately be saying Affinity does kind of like cloned versions of Photoshop and InDesign and everything. And I'm sure they're very nice. I'm sure they're just wonderful. But I again, when you're writing checks for $15,000 and then you get to the point where you realize that you can't process that file correctly to get it out into the world on a pro level, you're going to wish you'd spent a little bit of money on yourself and use these tools. If Affinity does what it's supposed to do, that's great. I am absolutely not going to
trust it with the $15,000
business. Yeah.
Doesn't it feel like have you ever had to bring your car into a repair shop that you're not familiar with normally, and you're like, oh man, I hope I'm not throwing bad cash after good cash on this one. It's Affinity a little bit feels like a software package that's holding a water bong. It's like, no, man, your book is going to come out fine, brother. It's no problem at all. And you're like, I don't know. I'm going to be writing a really big check to this printer. No, man, I swear a lot of really good programmers have come together and made Affinity for you, man. And you're like, I don't know if I feel good about this. I mean, like Brad, I have these very large checks that I have to cut to a printer. And my problem is now I have used Adobe products since 1996, 97, which that ages me. And I know what the final results will be, and I know how to get there using the tools in InDesign and in Photoshop. And so I'm terrified of switching that up, which is partially why I have not yet gone to CSP as a cartoonist, not to mention the coloring, but for just the cartooning aspect. And I'll be honest, it's because I don't want to switch lanes mid journey on Drive. Like I'm now 4 acts done of a final 6-act story, and I don't want to get to the printing process of Act 5 and be like, oh, I messed it up. Why did I switch to CSP? For some stupid reason that I've introduced, not CSP, but me. And that's just 26, 27 years of using Adobe Photoshop. I know it. I know it inside and out for what I needed to do. I don't want to switch lanes right now for me. But I think when I get done with Drive, I will switch to CSP like Brad did.
And just to wrap up the Affinity conversation, for all of our Affinity fans out there, they did just recently get bought by Canva. Right, that free online design software that you can access, and Canva did not buy Affinity software so that they could keep it cheap and affordable. They bought that, and they're gonna, in the next couple of years, they're going to want to make money on their investment. And so if you think you're going to be safe with Affinity, they're going to be doing with their prices exactly what Adobe did, because they can, and because that's why they bought them in the first place. They didn't buy them so they could keep it cheap. They bought it so that they could start to squeeze you just like Adobe did. So you might as well make your decision and stick with it, and make the best decision for long long term as opposed to short term. And that, I guess that brings us full circle. Procreate is kind of a short term solution in that great. It's cheap. It's easy to access and so on and so forth. But at some point, if you're going to be serious about going pro, at some point, you're going to have to look at the long-term solutions to your problems.
Yes.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Well, Brad, a mid-show update for everybody as we turn the corner on December. I want to remind everybody of long-standing advice that I have and Brad has and we have on the show, which is, we are big proponents of working like heck and enjoying your work and keeping the shoulder to the grindstone. And Brad especially works like a dog in terms of all year round. But I will say, between the week of Christmas and New Year's, Brad and I are big proponents of giving yourself that week off creatively.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons. Number one, no one is paying attention.
Right.
You think they're paying attention, they're not paying attention. Number two, no one will begrudge you if you say, I'm spending time with family this week. Not a single person on earth. Most people are themselves have time off work, have time off school, have time off anything in their life. So that's fine. Number 3 or 4, I don't know where I am on that bullet list. You got to give your brain a break. And this is a wonderful break to recharge with friends and family and catching up on movies and books and video games you might want to read and exploring the world a little bit and just relaxing. Giving your brain a week to sit fallow is great and also feels wonderful when you jump back into it on the first week. So this is a great week for reruns and for best of the years in terms of comics that you've produced. And also, don't forget, it's like, as Brad's always says, with the 4 C's, this is a great week to curate and to share other cartoonists that you love. What a nice way to pay it forward as you go into the new year. And so I will very strongly advocate for all of us just taking a break between Christmas and New Year's and letting reruns rule the show.
Can't co-sign that strongly enough. And also, especially the part about the best of the year stuff, because you'll notice that's everybody uses that strategy. Newspapers, platforms, Spotify does their Unwrapped and so forth. It's a great time for best of the year stuff. They're so easy to put together for a cartoonist, particularly. It's just a great strategy. And then you put that together, you fire it off, you go back to the eggnog, take that week off. I'm a big believer in that, especially because of the difference of today's online publishing landscape from when you and I were coming up. Take a break. You're knocking yourself out for very little positive things that are coming back to you. You're not getting anything, and you're scared. Oh, what if I lose readers? You know how the best way to gain readers back? Come back fresh and post something amazing, and they're right back in your pocket. So don't burn yourself out. Take a little time.
And I'm going to co-sign 99% of what Brad said, but I'm going to take issue with 1% of what Brad said, which is for God's sakes, don't drink eggnog. It is the devil's drink. Eggs were not made to be liquefied and put into a drink. That's an embryo. It should not be an alcoholic beverage. It's disgusting.
I've never had
like
eggnog.
Foot.
Does it taste like foot?
I can't psychologically wrap my head around like, oh, I'm going to drink this egg. I'm like, what am I doing? What is any of this? Have you ever had an eggnog?
I've never tasted eggnog in my life. I feel like I should now, but I've never had. What's the nog? I get it's got eggs. What's the nog?
The Nog is a junior character from Deep Space Nine. He was he was a
remember
Ferengi.
Nog. He was such a cutie. Little Nog.
Don't ask what aspect of Nog is in the drink. I don't know. I don't know what Nog is in eggnog. I don't know the origins of that. But it's a disgusting drink. Don't end your year off with eggnog. Treat yourself right.
Do you drink it cold or room temperature or hot?
I don't know. I don't want to know. Like, it comes in a milk jug sometimes. It's like, what's in this thing? I don't want any of this.
Oh, we found a real sore spot with Dave over here.
If you look through the Sheldon archives, there's about 40 cartoons about how disgusting eggnog is. I've gone back to that well way too many times. All right, so jumping us into our next question. This one goes specifically to Brad. And it says, hey, comic senpais. Senpai. What is a senpai, by the way? I know I should know what that is.
Like somebody who teaches.
Like
a teacher.
I know it's a Japanese word indicating teacher. Is that what it is? A senpai?
That was my understanding, yeah.
Okay. So, hey, I guess I needed to be taught that. So thank you, Brad. Hey, comic senpais. I love the idea of a content exchange on Patreon. Yeah. I've used it in the past to great effect on Kickstarter. Oh, that's interesting. Unfortunately, I'm having great trouble getting people to buy into the idea. Any advice for reaching out to other Patreon creators and convincing them it's a good idea? So I'm going to turn this over to my friend Brad, because not only is, frankly, this his idea, but he has used this very successfully over the last 5 to 10 years. Yeah. So, Brad, take us through what a Patreon content exchange is, how you approach it, how you reach out to people, and whether you find success with it.
You know what? Before we do that, the part where he says, I've done a similar thing for Kickstarter really bothers me, because I need you to help me out. I need you to help me think of any way that you could do something that falls under the area of Patreon content exchange for Kickstarter that isn't, in my opinion, a bad idea. Like,
well, I also was struck by that, because I was trying to figure out how that would work. Yeah. My only thought would be you would have to find other Kickstarters that are running at the exact same time.
Yeah.
That sort of have a similar mood. And then you would say, here, you can give this 30-page PDF to your backers as an update, and I'll give your 30-page PDF to my backers as an update, and point one another's backers toward the other one. I guess. I'm trying to think of some version of that, I'm guessing.
Somebody did that to me once on Kickstarter, where they said, hey, we're really happy to have you aboard as a Kickstarter backer. Here's somebody else's stuff that you might like. And I canceled my pledge so fucking quick that
listen to Cussy McGee over here. Oh my God, it's a very angry Brad Geiger today.
I can't. Great. Do you agree? I would strongly suggest somebody not do this for Kickstarter. And I'm surprised to hear myself say that, because I'm a strong advocate to do it on Patreon, but I don't like doing it on Kickstarter. And I don't know why that is, other than the fact that I had a visceral reaction when somebody pulled that on Kickstarter.
My reaction to that is everything we do, if you think about it, is trying to move people up to the ladder of finally pledging for the Kickstarter collection of the work we did over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Everything we do, all the social media posting, all the blog posting, all the Comic-Con appearances, every page iteration or comic strip iteration that we do, that we update with, all of that is trying to lead people, point people, steer people to backing us on Kickstarter. So when you eventually get somebody to back Brad Geiger or Dave Kellett on Kickstarter, don't then go, oh, hey, while you're here, maybe like, you did it. You got to a yes. Stop digging. You know what I mean? Like, don't then keep doing what you've been doing to get them to Kickstarter. Leave it be is what what you're reacting to.
I know why I hate this idea so much. And it's this. You got somebody into Kickstarter, they're buying your book. Basically is what it comes down to. Or they're buying your merchandise, right?
Right.
And now you're saying, here's something else for you to buy. Here's another responsibility.
That's what I mean. Like, you got to a yes. Stop.
And now you should buy this other thing. A Patreon content exchange is exactly the opposite. You're already a Patreon backer. Now I'm going to give you a bonus reward. Here's something extra that you weren't expecting to get. You don't have to pay extra for it. You don't have to buy it. This is a bonus. This is an extra above and beyond. So, I cannot argue strongly enough not to try this on Kickstarter. I don't think it's a a strategy that is a good idea for Kickstarter for the reason I just laid out.
Right.
But for Patreon, when you're giving something extra to your Patreon backers, it's a great idea. The problem is, as this person pointed out, the problem is it's hard to explain it to other Patreon creators because, let's face it, nobody's worse at marketing and promotion than cartoonists.
Yes.
You've got to explain basic cross-promotional strategies, stuff that you and I came up with for 20 years. The first part of the webcomics in the early 2000s was 100% cross-promotion because we didn't have social media, because we didn't have newsletters, we didn't have any of that stuff. It was all cross-promotion, so it's in our blood. We get cross-promotion, right? What are you laughing at? Why are you laughing at me?
When you have a light head cold, it's just funny. The tonal change is like, I just feel it in my bones that it becomes less of like, hey, supportive dad energy and more like, listen to me, you little twerps. I've got a head cold. I'm lightly fevering. I don't enjoy this. I'm Brad Geiger.
I am absolutely, I can feel my head.
I can tell that you're schwitzing a little bit and it's making it, and like...
So
anyway, I co-sign with Brad. So let me give you some strategies about Patreon exchanges because it is weird to get an email. Like imagine you're the other person from someone you've never met who's a cartoonist that says, I want to take some of your stuff for free and offer it to my readers. And I'm going to give you some of my stuff that you've never previously seen or encountered or heard of and give it to your readers. And obviously their first reaction is going to be like, what the hell is this? Who is this person? I don't know this.
Yeah.
So this is not necessarily helpful advice in the short term, but in the long term, this is one of those reasons why I still find networking in real life to be helpful because as soon as someone can put a face to the name Dave Kellett, they go, oh, I remember that guy. He was nice. He was personable. He was friendly. He was optimistic and cheery. But until then, I'm this random name on an email, and they're like, who the hell is Dave at davekellett.com? What? I don't know this guy. What? Sheldon? I've never heard of this. What is this nonsense? Yeah. But if I've met this cartoonist at either Alaska Comics Camp or San Diego Comic-Con or at the Schultz Museum or this or that in person, they go, oh, right. So I will tell you this. I have had a lot of trouble hiring cartoonists that I admire for Tales of the Drive when I'm saying, look, I want to pay you $4,000 to $8,000 to draw a short story for Drive. And they're like, no, I don't know who you are. What is this? Who are you? But as soon as I've met them, they're like, yeah, I'd love to do it. I'm happy. You know what? Yeah, it's great. Let's do it right now. It's a weird thing that like there is an ask. And it's a psychological block, not necessarily a transactional block, where people go, who is this? What is this? I don't know what this Patreon exchange is. Have you found that to be true, Brad? That if you've met them, it's easier than if you've coming at them with a cold call, basically?
Oh, I'm sure it would be. If I ever met people, it would be.
We're going back to old McGovern's over on his porch.
I'm sure it'd be easy. But like I've reached out to a number of people in my sphere saying, hey, we should do this content exchange. And I have a whole Google Doc that's all prepared that I explain what it is, how it works, step by step. Here's what's going to happen. And I've got a really good track record of, at the end of it, both of us gain Patreon backers. It's not like I'm stealing your Patreon backers or you're stealing mine. We both gain. And I've got a whole copy and paste. And I still get ghosted by about a good 60% of the people that I reach out to because I think they're sure that I'm up to something.
They don't know you. Yeah. Exactly. I see why that happens. Yeah.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. As a Patreon exclusive, would you be willing to put that copy paste up on the body that goes with this Patreon post?
Yeah. Let me see if I can find it. I'd put that up there.
Or we can also cut that if I'm just throwing you under the bus.
No, I can absolutely put. I was just trying to think if there's anything that is like proprietary there, but there's not. I can post it.
That just seems like a nice, helpful thing. That's that's
what I was thinking because it's just to my best interest that this idea. I've also done posts about this on webcomics.com, the Webcomics Handbook. It's to everybody's best advantage that this idea gets more and more broadly applied.
Right.
So yeah, I would absolutely post that in there as a Patreon special.
But in general, I have done it I've not done it as many times as Brad. Brad has used it really well. And I will say every time I've done it, it's been a positive.
Yeah.
And I first of all, I heartily recommend trying it. I heartily co-sign the results of it. I think it's advantageous for everybody involved. I think it harkens back to the early days of webcomics when we were the ones we were waiting for in terms of lifting our own tide, which was great. And it honestly, it creates community. It creates a sense of we're all in this together because we are. It's a reminder that for Brad to succeed, I don't have to fail. We can both lift each other's audiences up. And even for the people that ghost Brad, down the line, they might be like, well, I remember that guy. He's the guy that reached out to me about that. Okay, I since have checked out his work. 3-4 years. You never know 3-4 years down the line where they might come back to you. So, I think it's a worthwhile strategy to try for anybody that has an existing comic.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in under-promising and over-delivering to your Patreon backers, right? In other words, giving them lots of reasons to keep that subscription going. And this is a bonus. This is something above and beyond what you were already. All of a sudden, they wake up that morning, they see, boom! I've got a comic from Dave Kellogg. I've got a 24-page ebook from this person that does work that I really like, and so now I get to expose myself to that with no strings attached. I'm not saying you gotta become a Patreon backer of this other person. I'm going to point you to their Patreon because, of course, I am. But I'm not going to say that there's no quid pro quo. Here's a free thing, a bonus that you got, and that's a great way to keep your Patreon backers delighted. And again, I've always seen a few extra people at the end of the month. The person that I'm cross promoting with does too. It's not like anybody's stealing anybody's audience, but it's so hard to get cartoonists to understand that.
And in the long game that is our career, let's say Brad shares a 30-page, 60-page, 100-page PDF with these people of this other title, right?
Yeah.
And sees no increase in his patronage, which, by the way, is the logical result on the short term. But in the long term, I guarantee you that Brad has picked up 1, 2, 5, 10, 15 new readers that in the long term, some of those are going to become patrons or back a book or this or that. And so this is kind of one of those things that you might not see immediate returns, and it might not be life-changing returns on one attempt, but you do this frequently over the course of a couple of years. I can absolutely see this being advantageous.
Absolutely. It's a great cross promotion. And as social media continues to decline, we're going to be having to go back to a lot of those old cross promotion standbys. You might as well get used to it. Another thing you might want to get used to is after Dave and I have been John for about an hour, you're going to hear me say something like this. You've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my very feverish, very cussy friend, Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my damned friend, Dave Kellogg, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Less Angry Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever wonderful, rarely angry Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, and we know that you do, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode. Also, thank you for those 4-star, 5-star. You're giving us all the stars over there on Spotify, and we can't thank you enough because you are helping getting our show out to those people that need to hear it.
Amen. And Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/Comic Lab, where there will be some special money-saving tips this week in the pro tips. So do head over there for this one. And I will go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/Brad needs a Tylenol.
I need something. I need some of that Robitussin, some of that Dayquil, NyQuil. I need all the quills, none of the nogs, all of the quills.
Isn't that a thing that kids, when they were trying to basically get drunk, they would say doing the tussin, or wasn't that a
There
phrase?
was something about the tussin. I remember that was part of a stand-up routine somewhere out there, the tussin. But
tussin.
yeah, I need all the stuff.
And now because of that, when I have a cold and go to CVS, it's behind that damn locker that you could never get an employee for. And you're like, I just want Robitussin, for God's sakes.